The massive viewscreen aboard the Imperial command vessel, Iron Dominion, displayed the blue-green planet, hanging in space, like a forbidden jewel. Major Arian stood motionless on the command deck, his six-fingered hands clasped tightly behind his back as he studied the world that would soon become another conquest for the Empire. Earth. Even the name itself was primitive, denoting mere soil, dirt, the simplest of elements. Yet something about this unremarkable world had caused generations of deep space observers to mark it with warnings. "The Emperor grows impatient for your assessment." "Major," said General Solon, his voice cutting through Arian's contemplation. The general's imposing figure cast a long shadow across the polished deck. His ceremonial armor, adorned with the emblems of 100 conquered worlds, gleamed under the artificial lights. "My assessment remains unchanged from yesterday, General," Arian replied, his voice steady despite the tension coiling in his chest. "I believe we should heed the warnings in our archives. 3 separate civilizations have left records cautioning against engagement with this planet." General Solon's expression hardened. "Records from extinct civilizations. Major, their weakness is precisely why they no longer exist, while the Empire continues to expand." Arian gestured toward the holographic display beside him, activating the ancient transmission. The scratchy, distorted message that had been intercepted by Proxima 5 Observatory centuries ago played once more. "Warning to all spacefaring species. Earth harbors a primitive but dangerous consciousness. Do not approach. Do not attempt conquest. It is a trap." The message continued, but degraded into unintelligible static. This fragment was all that remained of a civilization that had once controlled 7 star systems before mysteriously collapsing. The Empire's xenohistorians had uncovered similar warnings from 2 other extinct species, all regarding this seemingly unimportant blue planet. "The Emperor's orders are clear," General Solon said, deactivating the hologram with a dismissive wave. "The 8th Fleet will secure this world as a strategic outpost for our expansion into this spiral arm. Your tactical expertise is required for the invasion plan, not for questioning Imperial directives." Arian nodded stiffly. "Of course, General. The preliminary scout team will deploy at dawn." As General Solon strode away, Arian turned back to the viewscreen. Earth rotated slowly, clouds swirling across its atmosphere. Something about the planet seemed to pulse with an unfamiliar energy that the ship's sensors couldn't quite identify. Arian had conquered 23 worlds for the Empire, earning his reputation as a brilliant strategist. But never before had he felt this peculiar sensation, a primal warning that whispered to his instincts. The Empire stretched across 12,000 light-years, encompassing over 400 habitable worlds. Their technological superiority had rendered resistance futile for centuries. Yet, as Arian stared at the silent blue planet, he couldn't shake the feeling that they were making a terrible mistake. Major Mira, the intelligence officer who had served with Arian through 3 campaigns, approached silently and stood beside him. Her neural implants glowed faintly beneath her translucent skin as she processed data streams. "You're concerned about the warnings," she said. It wasn't a question. 3 advanced civilizations left identical cautions about this primitive world. Arian replied quietly. "The logical conclusion is that they encountered something our sensors cannot detect." Mira's eyes narrowed as she studied the planet. "The Emperor believes this location will complete our dominance of the sector. The resources alone would fuel our expansion for decades. And if the warnings are valid?" Mira hesitated, her implants pulsing as she considered the probability matrices. "Then we risk everything on an unnecessary conquest." "Precisely," Arian said. "Yet our concerns are dismissed as superstition and cowardice." "The scout team deploys in 6 hours," Mira reminded him. "Perhaps they will provide the evidence needed to justify caution." Arian nodded, though the knot of apprehension in his chest tightened. "Perhaps." The scout vessel departed at dawn, a sleek reconnaissance craft carrying 12 of the Empire's elite soldiers. Commander Vex, a veteran of 30 combat missions, led the team. The craft descended through Earth's atmosphere, transmitting continuous data back to the Iron Dominion. Atmospheric composition within acceptable parameters, reported Vex. No evidence of advanced technology. Detecting primitive electromagnetic communications only. No orbital defenses. No significant energy signatures. Arian and General Solon watched from the command deck as the scout ship approached a vast landmass surrounded by blue ocean. Landing zone identified, Vex continued. Desert region. Minimal indigenous lifeforms detected. Proceeding with touchdown protocols. The scout ship landed without incident, kicking up clouds of dust as it settled on the arid plain. Commander Vex's image appeared on the view screen, his helmet visor reflecting the harsh sunlight. Commencing surface exploration, he reported. Team deploying in standard formation. The soldiers spread out around their craft, weapons ready despite the apparent absence of threats. For several minutes, they methodically surveyed the immediate area, collecting soil samples and scanning for any anomalies. Initial assessment confirms preliminary data, Vex said. No signs of advanced civilization. Primitive flora and fauna only. This world appears defenseless. General Solon smiled with satisfaction. Excellent. Continue the survey and prepare for... Wait, Vex interrupted, his voice suddenly tense. Something's happening. The transmission flickered. Static crawled across the image. Commander Vex, report, General Solon ordered sharply. The ground. I can't explain. Vex's voice strained. Something's affecting our systems. Mental interference. The team is experiencing hallucinations. Request immediate extraction. The soldiers on screen began to move erratically, some dropping to their knees, others firing their weapons at unseen threats. There's something here, Vex gasped. Something ancient. It's aware of us, The transmission abruptly cut to static. Restore the feed, General Solon commanded. The communications officer worked frantically at his console. Unable to re-establish contact. General, all signals from the scout team have ceased. Launch a second team immediately, Solon ordered. Full combat configuration. Arian stepped forward. General, I strongly advise against... Your advice is noted. Major. Solon cut him off. But I will not report to the Emperor that we abandoned our mission because of static interference. 12 elite Imperial soldiers just vanished without firing a single shot, Arian argued. Something on that planet neutralized them instantly. General Solon's expression darkened. Or perhaps Commander Vex's equipment malfunctioned. We will not retreat based on superstition and technical failures. The second scout team launched within the hour, heavily armed and with enhanced shielding. They approached the same landing zone, proceeding with even greater caution. Previous scout vessel located, reported the team leader. No signs of damage. Boarding to investigate. The live feed showed the soldiers entering the abandoned craft. Inside, they found nothing. No bodies, no signs of struggle, no evidence of what had happened to Commander Vex and his team. They had simply vanished. Proceeding with exterior investigation, the team leader continued, though Arian noted the tension in his voice. As the soldiers spread out around the site, one of them suddenly stiffened and pointed to the horizon. Movement detected. The camera panned to reveal a shimmering distortion in the air, like heat waves rising from the desert floor. It approached rapidly, expanding as it moved. Unknown phenomenon advancing, the soldier reported. Activating defensive protocols. The soldiers formed a perimeter, weapons trained on the approaching distortion. The first shots were fired, energy weapons discharging into the shimmering air. The distortion absorbed the blasts without slowing. Weapons ineffective, came the terse report, switching to temporal disruptors. The higher-grade weapons fired, casting rippling waves of distortion toward the approaching phenomenon. For a moment, it seemed to pause. Then it surged forward with renewed intensity. "It's responding to our attacks," shouted one soldier. "It's accelerate." The transmission cut to static once more. Silence fell over the command deck. 24 Imperial soldiers, equipped with technology that had conquered hundreds of worlds, had been neutralized without firing an effective shot. General Solan's face had paled, but his expression remained resolute. "Prepare the main invasion force," he ordered. "Whatever this phenomenon is, it cannot stand against the full might of the Eighth Fleet." "General," Arian said firmly, "I must officially register my objection. We are facing an unknown entity that has already neutralized our elite forces. The warnings in our archives specifically cautioned against this exact scenario." "Your objection is noted, Major," Solan replied coldly. "Now, prepare the invasion strategy as ordered, or I will find someone who will—" As Solan stormed off the command deck, Mira approached Arian. "I've been analyzing the transmissions," she whispered. "There was something embedded in the static, a pattern I cannot identify. It appears to be some form of communication." Arian's eyes widened. "Can you isolate it?" "I'm trying, but our systems aren't designed to interpret it. It's unlike any language or code in our databases." "Keep working on it," Arian instructed. "And find Dr. Thala. Her expertise in xenopsychology might provide insight." Over the next 12 hours, as the Iron Dominion prepared its invasion force, strange phenomena began to manifest throughout the ship. Crew members reported unusual dreams, visions of ancient forests and vast oceans teeming with life. Others experienced momentary hallucinations of being watched by unseen presences. The ship's systems suffered inexplicable glitches, particularly in areas focused on weapons and tactical planning. Dr. Thala, a diminutive female with pale blue skin and enormous black eyes, met Arian in his private quarters. Her expertise in alien psychology had proven valuable in understanding the behaviors of conquered species. "Something is attempting contact," she said without preamble. "The phenomena reported by the crew are consistent with a powerful telepathic entity trying to establish communication across species barriers." "The planet itself?" Arian asked incredulously. "Not precisely," Thala clarified. "Rather, a collective consciousness that has evolved alongside the planet's biosphere. The primitive species on the surface may be unaware of its existence, or may perceive it through religious constructs." "Can we communicate with it?" Dr. Thala hesitated. "Possibly, but not through conventional means. This entity operates on a fundamentally different plane of consciousness. Our telepathic interfaces are designed for individual minds, not a planetary consciousness. And if we proceed with the invasion, based on what happened to our scout teams, I believe this entity perceives us as a threat and will defend itself. The warnings in our archives suggest that previous attempts at conquest were met with catastrophic results." Arian paced the room, his mind racing. "General Solan won't delay the invasion based on telepathic theories. The Emperor expects results." "Then, perhaps," Dr. Thala suggested carefully, "we should gather more concrete evidence." The invasion preparations continued unabated. 10,000 Imperial soldiers readied for deployment, supported by heavy artillery and air support. The Iron Dominion moved into low orbit, positioning itself for the coordinated attack that would begin at dawn. That night, as Arian reviewed the tactical plans in his quarters, he was startled by a sudden power fluctuation. The lights dimmed, then brightened again. His computer terminal flickered, then displayed a series of symbols he didn't recognize, flowing, organic patterns that seemed to pulse with an inner light. As he stared at the screen, the symbols began to coalesce into a recognizable form, a message in Imperial Standard language. "Why do you come to destroy?" Arian froze, his breath catching in his throat. After a moment's hesitation, he typed a response. "We seek to expand our empire." The symbols shifted again, forming new words. "Many have tried. All have failed. Your technology cannot prevail against the primal consciousness." What is this primal consciousness? Arian typed. I am the collective awareness of all life that has ever existed on this world. I have evolved over billions of years. I cannot be conquered. Arian's hands trembled slightly as he considered his next question. What happened to our scout teams? They have been absorbed into the collective. Their knowledge now serves the whole. Can they be returned? There was a long pause before the response appeared. They no longer exist as separate entities. What was learned cannot be unlearned. Arian felt a chill run through him. This wasn't merely an unknown defense system. It was an entirely different form of existence, one that operated on principles the Empire had never encountered. I must warn my superiors, he typed. They will not listen. Pride blinds them, as it has blinded others before. The screen went dark, then returned to displaying the invasion plans as if nothing had happened. Arian sat motionless, trying to process what had just occurred. Was it real, or some form of hallucination? The warning suddenly seemed much more tangible, more urgent. He immediately summoned Major Mira and Dr. Thala to his quarters, sharing his experience. Dr. Thala's eyes widened as she listened. This confirms my theory, she said excitedly. The entity is attempting direct communication through our technology. It's adapting to our neural patterns, finding ways to bridge the gap between our consciousness and its own. Could it be manipulating our perceptions? Arian asked. Creating illusions to discourage our invasion? Possible, Thala admitted, but unlikely. The consistency of the warnings across multiple species and centuries suggests a genuine phenomenon, not a tactical deception. Mira, ever the pragmatist, frowned. General Solon won't accept this as evidence. He'll dismiss it as equipment malfunction or psychological warfare. Then we need undeniable proof, Arian said firmly. Something that even Solon cannot ignore. They worked through the night, analyzing the ship's logs and comparing them with the ancient warnings. As dawn approached, Arian made his decision. He would present his findings to General Solon one last time, and if that failed, he would take more drastic action. The command deck buzzed with activity as the invasion force prepared for deployment. General Solon stood before the tactical display, reviewing the final attack plans with his officers. General, Arian said as he approached, I must speak with you urgently. Solon's expression hardened. The time for debate has passed. Major, the deployment begins in 30 minutes. I've encountered direct communication from the entity on the planet. Arian pressed on. It confirms the warnings in our archives. This is not a conventional enemy we can defeat with military force. You claim to have spoken with a planetary consciousness? Solon's tone was incredulous, bordering on contemptuous. Perhaps you should visit the medical bay. Major, stress can induce hallucinations. I've documented the interaction, Arian insisted, presenting a data crystal. Dr. Thala has confirmed the psychological pattern is consistent with a collective consciousness. General Solon took the crystal, but made no move to review its contents. Major Arian, your distinguished service record is the only reason I'm not relieving you of duty immediately. Return to your post and fulfill your obligations to the Empire. General, I implore you. Enough! Solon's voice thundered across the command deck. The Emperor's will shall be done. We attack as planned. Arian stood rigid, aware that every officer on the deck was watching. In all his years of service, he had never directly challenged a superior's orders, but neither had he ever been so certain of impending disaster. Then I must formally invoke the Praetorian Protocol, Arian said, his voice steady despite the gravity of his words. A shocked murmur rippled through the command deck. The Praetorian Protocol was an ancient imperial law that allowed a senior officer to challenge a military action if they believed it presented an existential threat to the Empire itself. It had not been invoked in over 3 centuries. General Solon's face darkened with fury. You dare? I do, Arian replied. I believe this invasion will result in catastrophic losses and potentially threaten the stability of the Empire. I request an emergency council to review the evidence before we proceed." "Denied," Solon snapped. "The protocol requires the support of at least 2 command-level officers. You stand alone. Major—" "He does not," came a voice from behind them. Major Mira stepped forward, her expression resolute. "I second the invocation of the Praetorian Protocol." "As do I," added Dr. Thala, joining them. "The psychological evidence alone warrants further investigation." General Solon looked between them, his rage barely contained. 3 officers do not outweigh the Emperor's direct command. "The law is clear, General," Arian said firmly. "When the protocol is properly invoked, the operation must be delayed for 12 hours while evidence is reviewed." For a moment, it seemed Solon might order their arrest. Then, with visible effort, he controlled his anger. "Very well. You have 12 hours to present your evidence to a formal council. But know this, if your claims are found baseless, you will all face charges of sedition." The council convened in the ship's strategic chamber. 7 senior officers, including General Solon, sat in judgment as Arian presented his case. He displayed the ancient warnings, the footage from the lost scout teams, the documented phenomena experienced by the crew, and finally, the record of his communication with the planetary consciousness. This entity, which calls itself the primal consciousness, is unlike any adversary we have encountered, Arian explained. It does not use conventional weapons or defenses. Instead, it appears to operate on a psychic level, absorbing and redirecting consciousness itself. "Superstition and primitive fear tactics," General Solon countered dismissively. "Our forces have overcome psychic resistance on a dozen worlds." "Not like this," Dr. Thala interjected. "Those were individual telepaths or limited hive minds. This is a consciousness that has evolved over billions of years, integrating every life form that has ever existed on the planet. Its complexity and power are orders of magnitude beyond anything in our records." The debate continued for hours, with evidence presented and contested from both sides. As the 12-hour deadline approached, the council remained divided. 3 officers supported Arian's caution, while 3 sided with General Solon. The deciding vote would come from Admiral Krell, who had remained silent throughout much of the proceedings. "I have reviewed all evidence presented," Admiral Krell said finally, his ancient voice rasping in the quiet chamber. "Major Arian's concerns have merit, but they do not conclusively prove an existential threat to the Empire. However, prudence dictates a modified approach." He turned to General Solon. "You will proceed with the invasion, but with a reduced initial force, 1,000 soldiers instead of 10,000. If they succeed without incident, the full force will follow." Arian's heart sank. It was a compromise that satisfied no one and still risked Imperial lives. "Admiral, I must protest," he began, but Krell raised a hand to silence him. "The decision is made. Major, you will oversee the deployment of the initial force personally. Perhaps witnessing the operation firsthand will allay your concerns." General Solon smiled thinly. "A wise compromise, Admiral. The deployment will begin at dawn." As the council dispersed, Mira approached Arian. "This changes nothing," she whispered. "The danger remains." "I know," Arian replied grimly. "But we've done all we can within the system. Now we must prepare for the consequences." The modified invasion force prepared for deployment. 1,000 of the Empire's finest soldiers boarded the landing craft, their armor gleaming, weapons primed. Arian, as ordered, would accompany them to the surface, ostensibly to coordinate the tactical response, but really to witness the folly of their actions firsthand. As the landing craft separated from the Iron Dominion and began their descent through Earth's atmosphere, Arian stood at the command console, watching the blue planet grow larger in the view screen. Beside him, Commander Valen, who would lead the ground forces, reviewed the final approach vectors. "We'll establish a defensive perimeter immediately upon landing," Valen said. "If this consciousness manifests as it did with the scout teams, we'll be ready." Arian nodded, though he doubted any preparation would be sufficient. The fleet of landing craft cut through the clouds, revealing the vast landscape below. They approached the same desert region where the scout teams had vanished, their sensors scanning for any anomalies. "All readings normal," reported the pilot. "No unusual energy signatures detected." The craft descended in formation, touching down on the arid plain in a cloud of dust. Hatches opened, and soldiers poured out, quickly establishing a defensive perimeter around the landing zone. Arian emerged from the command craft, the hot, dry air of Earth filling his lungs. For several minutes, nothing happened. The soldiers secured the area, setting up defensive positions and scanning equipment. Commander Valen approached Arian, his expression smugly confident. "It appears your primal consciousness has decided not to make an appearance, Major." Before Arian could respond, a soldier called out, "Movement detected! Multiple directions!" All around the perimeter, the air began to shimmer and distort, just as it had for the scout teams. But this time, the phenomenon was much larger, encircling the entire landing zone. "Defensive positions!" Valen shouted. "All units, prepare to engage!" The soldiers trained their weapons on the approaching distortion, but held their fire, waiting for orders. Arian stepped forward, raising a hand. "Hold," he commanded. "Do not fire. It may interpret aggression as a threat." Commander Valen glared at him. "This is a military operation, Major, not a diplomatic mission." "Look around you, Commander," Arian said firmly. "We are completely surrounded. If this entity wanted to destroy us immediately, it could have done so. It's waiting." The shimmering distortion had stopped advancing, creating a perfect circle around the Imperial forces. Within the distortion, faint images appeared, faces, forms, landscapes, flickering in and out of visibility like half-remembered dreams. Arian stepped toward the perimeter, ignoring Valen's protest. He approached the shimmering barrier, stopping just short of touching it. "We come in peace," he said clearly, hoping the entity could understand spoken language as well as it had written communication. The distortion rippled, then parted directly in front of Arian, creating an opening. Beyond it stood a figure, humanoid, but clearly not human. Its form shifted subtly, as if composed of countless smaller entities moving in perfect harmony. When it spoke, its voice seemed to come from everywhere at once. "You come with weapons," it said. "With ships designed to kill, with soldiers trained to conquer. This is not peace." Arian swallowed hard, aware that 1,000 Imperial soldiers stood behind him, their weapons trained on the entity. "I tried to prevent this invasion," he admitted. "I believed the warnings." "Yet you are here," the entity observed. "Under orders, against my counsel?" The entity studied him, its form continuing to shift and flow. "Your empire has conquered many worlds, extinguished many consciousnesses. You believe your technology and your numbers make you invincible. And you believe your consciousness can defeat our empire," Valen called out, stepping forward to stand beside Arian. The entity turned its attention to the commander. "I do not wish to defeat. I wish to be left in peace, but I will defend this world if forced." "Brave words," Valen sneered. "But we have heard similar declarations from 100 worlds, all now part of the Empire." "Commander, I advise caution," Arian warned, but Valen ignored him. "Soldiers of the Empire," Valen called out, "prepare to advance. This entity is nothing but a projection, a trick to inspire fear. We will not be deterred." The entity's form darkened, swirling with increasing speed. "You have been warned," it said, its voice deepening. "By those who came before, by those who understood. Now you will learn." The distortion surrounding the landing zone began to pulse with energy. The ground beneath their feet trembled. "Open fire!" Valen commanded. 1,000 energy weapons discharged simultaneously, streaking toward the entity and the surrounding distortion. The beams struck the shimmering barrier and disappeared, absorbed without effect. The entity raised its arms, and the distortion surged inward from all sides. Soldiers cried out as the shimmering energy washed over them, their weapons falling silent. One by one, they collapsed to the ground, their bodies suddenly limp. "Stop!" Arian shouted. "We surrender! Call off your attack!" But it was too late. The distortion continued its inexorable advance, enveloping soldier after soldier. Their consciousnesses were being absorbed, just as the entity had described. Not killed. Something far more profound was happening. Arian watched in horror as Commander Valen was engulfed. The commander's expression shifted from rage to shock to something like wonder before he collapsed alongside his troops. Within minutes, nearly the entire invasion force lay unconscious on the desert floor. Only Arian remained standing, the distortion swirling around him, but never quite touching him. The entity approached, its form now incorporating aspects of imperial appearance, a visual echo of the consciousnesses it had just absorbed. "You tried to warn them," it said. "You understood the danger." "Not fully," Arian admitted. "Not until now. What have you done to them?" "Their individual consciousnesses have been temporarily separated from their physical forms." The entity explained. "They experience now what it means to be part of the whole. Some will accept this new reality. Others will resist. All will learn." "Will they return?" "Their bodies will awaken. Their minds will be forever changed." Above them, the communications channels suddenly crackled with urgent messages from the Iron Dominion. The ship's sensors had detected the energy surge and the sudden loss of life signs from the invasion force. "Major Arian, report!" General Solan's voice demanded. "What is happening down there?" Arian looked at the entity, then at the fallen soldiers around him. "The invasion has failed, General," he replied. "The entire force has been neutralized without firing an effective shot. The entity is beyond our ability to combat." "Impossible!" Solan raged. "We're launching the full invasion force immediately." "No!" Arian shouted. "General, you must listen. This entity cannot be defeated by conventional means. It will absorb any force you send against it." The entity stepped closer to Arian. "Your leader refuses to understand, just as others have refused before. They will learn through experience what they could have learned through wisdom." In orbit, the Iron Dominion began launching the remainder of the invasion force. 9,000 soldiers in hundreds of landing craft, descending toward the planet like a swarm of metal insects. The entity looked skyward. "They come to their own undoing." "Please," Arian pleaded. "There must be another way. Thousands more lives will be lost." "Not lost," the entity corrected. "Transformed. But yes, there is another way." It turned its full attention to Arian. "You must return to your ship. You must show them the truth. You must make them understand what cannot be explained in words." "How?" Arian asked desperately. "I will give you a fragment of myself, a seed of the primal consciousness. Through you, they will experience what words cannot convey." Before Arian could respond, the entity reached out and touched his forehead. A blinding light filled his vision, and he felt something enter his mind, a vast, ancient presence that contained multitudes, billions of years of evolution, countless lives lived and ended, all connected in a web of consciousness that spanned the entire planet. For an instant, Arian experienced Earth's history, from the first primitive microbes to the complex web of life that now covered its surface. He felt the rise and fall of species, the slow dance of continents, the patient evolution of consciousness itself, and he understood in that moment, why this world could never be conquered. When his vision cleared, he stood alone among the fallen soldiers. The entity had vanished, but Arian could still feel its presence within his mind, a quiet, watchful awareness that now shared his consciousness. Above, the second wave of landing craft continued their descent, unaware of what awaited them. Arian knew he had to act quickly. He raced to the command craft, which remained operational, and initiated the emergency launch sequence. As the craft rose into the air, he opened a channel to the Iron Dominion. "General Solon, this is Major Arian. I am returning to the ship with critical information. You must halt the invasion immediately." "You abandon your post in the middle of battle." Solon's voice was incredulous with rage. "There is no battle, General. Only annihilation. I have evidence you cannot ignore. Hold the invasion force until I return." Whether it was the desperation in Arian's voice or some lingering respect for his service record, General Solon hesitated. "You have 30 minutes. Major. After that, the invasion proceeds regardless of your evidence." Arian's craft raced through the atmosphere, pushing its engines beyond safe limits. Within his mind, the seed of the primal consciousness observed silently, its ancient awareness, a constant presence behind his thoughts. When he docked with the Iron Dominion, armed guards were waiting. They escorted him directly to the command deck, where General Solon stood with Admiral Krell and the other senior officers. "Major Arian," Solon said coldly, "explain your desertion of the ground forces." "They were already lost, General," Arian replied. "Just as the scout teams were lost. The entity on the planet, the primal consciousness, cannot be defeated by our weapons or technology." "So you claim," Solon sneered, "yet you stand here unharmed." "Because I was spared," Arian said. "Because I tried to prevent the invasion, and because I now carry the means to show you the truth." He stepped forward, aware of the guards tensing around him. "The entity gave me a fragment of itself, a seed of its consciousness. Through me, you can experience what words cannot describe." Admiral Krell frowned. "You claim to be carrying an alien consciousness?" "I do, and I offer to share that knowledge with you, General Solon, so you may understand why this invasion must be halted." Solon's hand moved to his sidearm. "Or perhaps you've been compromised, controlled by this entity to sabotage our mission."
"If that were true," Arian countered, "I would have remained on the surface to be absorbed with the others. Instead, I risked everything to return and warn you. Scan me if you wish. My brain patterns remain my own, merely expanded."
Dr. Thala stepped forward with a neural scanner, passing it over Arian's head. She studied the readings with wide eyes. "His patterns are intact but significantly altered. There is a secondary structure interwoven with his consciousness, but it doesn't appear to be controlling him." "And this seed can communicate with us?" Admiral Krell asked. His interest clearly piqued, despite his skepticism. "Not through words," Arian explained. "Through direct experience. I need only touch you, and you will understand." General Solon backed away. "This is absurd. I will not allow some alien consciousness to infect my mind." "Then we are doomed to repeat the mistakes of those who came before us," Arian said quietly. "The warnings in our archives will be fulfilled, and the Eighth Fleet will join the list of those who ignored the danger." Admiral Krell studied Arian intently. The ancient officer had survived 100 campaigns through a combination of courage and caution. Now he stepped forward, his decision made. "I will experience this consciousness," he declared. "If there is truth to these warnings, I must know it." "Admiral, I must protest," Solon objected. "Your protest is noted, General," Krell replied firmly. "But I will not send thousands more soldiers to their deaths without exploring every possibility." Arian approached the Admiral and placed his hand on the old officer's temple. "Immediately," Krell gasped, his eyes widening as the seed of the primal consciousness flowed between them, sharing its ancient wisdom and perspective. For several minutes, they stood frozen in that position, the command deck silent around them. Then Krell stumbled backward, his face pale but his eyes filled with a new understanding. "By the stars," he whispered. "It's true, all of it." "Admiral?" Solon's voice was uncertain now. "Recall the invasion force immediately," Krell ordered, his voice strengthening with conviction. "All craft are to return to the Iron Dominion without landing. We are withdrawing from Earth orbit." "But the Emperor's orders can be countermanded when new information of strategic importance is discovered," Krell finished firmly. "I take full responsibility for this decision. Earth is not to be invaded. Not now. Not ever." Solon looked from Krell to Arian, his expression conflicted. "What did you see?" Krell shook his head slowly. "Words cannot describe it, General. But I understand now why those civilizations left warnings. The primal consciousness is not our enemy, but it will defend its world with a power we cannot comprehend. You should experience it yourself, General," Arian suggested, "to truly understand." For a moment, it seemed Solon would refuse. Then, reluctantly, he stepped forward. "Very well. Show me this truth that has so convinced the Admiral." Arian placed his hand on Solon's temple, and once again, the seed of consciousness flowed between them. Solon's reaction was more violent. He jerked and would have fallen if Arian hadn't supported him. When the connection broke, the general's face was ashen, his customary arrogance replaced by profound shock. "Recall all forces," he ordered, his voice hoarse. "Immediately." The command was relayed throughout the fleet. Landing craft already in descent reversed course, returning to their motherships. On the surface, the fallen soldiers began to stir, waking from their trance with new awareness in their eyes. Over the next several hours, the invasion force was recovered from the planet's surface. As each soldier returned, they carried with them a piece of the experience they had shared with the primal consciousness. Some were traumatized, others enlightened, but all were fundamentally changed by the encounter. The Iron Dominion and the Eighth Fleet broke orbit, withdrawing to a safe distance from Earth. Admiral Krell convened an emergency council to determine their next course of action. "We cannot simply ignore the Emperor's orders," one officer argued. "He expects this world to be conquered." "And we cannot simply sacrifice thousands of lives in a futile assault," Krell countered. "The evidence is clear. Earth cannot be taken by force." "Then what do we do?" asked another officer. Arian, who had been silent until now, spoke up. "We tell the truth. We present the Emperor with the evidence we have gathered, the warnings in the archives, the fate of the scout teams, and most importantly, the direct experience of the primal consciousness." "You propose to expose the Emperor to this alien consciousness?" Solon asked incredulously. "I propose to give him the information he needs to make an informed decision," Arian replied. "Just as you and Admiral Krell received that information?" Krell nodded slowly. "Major Arian is right. The Emperor must understand what we now understand. Only then can he decide whether Earth is worth the cost." The Council agreed, though not without reservations. A delegation would return to the Imperial capital, bearing the seed of consciousness that Arian now carried. The Emperor would be given the opportunity to experience the truth directly. As the fleet prepared for the long journey home, Arian stood on the observation deck, gazing down at the blue planet that had changed everything. Within his mind, the fragment of the primal consciousness stirred. "You understand now," it communicated, not in words but in impressions and emotions. "Why we must remain separate." "I understand," Arian acknowledged silently. "Your form of existence is incompatible with ours. Neither can conquer the other without destroying what makes each unique. Yet we can coexist," the consciousness suggested, "at a distance, with mutual respect." Arian considered this. The Empire had always defined itself by conquest, by the relentless expansion of its borders. The idea of leaving a world unconquered, of accepting limitations, was revolutionary.
It will not be easy, he admitted. The Emperor has never accepted defeat.
This is not defeat, the consciousness corrected. It is wisdom, the recognition that some paths lead only to destruction.
Major Mira joined him at the viewport, her expression thoughtful. The soldiers who were absorbed and returned, they're different now, she said. Calmer, more contemplative. Some say they can still feel the planet's consciousness, even at this distance. It changes you, Arian agreed. To experience such vastness, such interconnection, it makes our empire seem small by comparison.
Do you think the Emperor will understand? Arian watched as Earth receded in the distance, a blue jewel against the blackness of space. He must. The alternative is to repeat the mistakes of those who came before us, the civilizations that left warnings we ignored. And if he doesn't, then we must find another way, Arian said firmly. Because I will not be part of an invasion that leads to the destruction of what we hold dear. The journey back to the imperial capital took 3 months. During that time, Arian worked with Dr. Thala to document everything they had learned about the primal consciousness. The seed within his mind continued to share insights, helping him understand the nature of the entity that had evolved alongside Earth for billions of years. When they finally arrived, the capital was abuzz with news of the Eighth Fleet's unexpected return. The Emperor summoned Admiral Krell, General Solon, and Major Arian to the Imperial throne room immediately. Emperor Zaltar, ruler of the most expansive empire in known space, was not accustomed to failure. His crimson robes flowed around his massive frame as he glared down at the officers from his elevated throne. "Explain," he commanded, his voice echoing through the vast chamber. "Why has Earth not been added to our territories?" Admiral Krell stepped forward, bowing deeply. "Your Imperial Majesty, we encountered a force beyond our ability to overcome. Not a military force, but a consciousness that evolved on Earth over billions of years." "A consciousness?" the Emperor repeated skeptically. "You retreated because of a ghost story?" "Not a ghost, Your Majesty," Arian interjected, stepping forward despite protocol. "A real entity that absorbed our scout teams and neutralized our invasion force without casualties. It could have destroyed us all, but it chose to teach us instead." The Emperor's eyes narrowed. Teach? What lesson could a primitive world possibly teach the Empire? "That not all power comes from weapons or technology," Arian replied. "That consciousness itself can be a force more potent than our greatest battleships." "Preposterous!" the Emperor scoffed. "I will send the Third Fleet to complete what you failed to accomplish." "Before you do, Your Majesty," Arian said boldly, "I ask that you experience what we experienced. The entity granted me a fragment of itself, a seed of understanding that can be shared through direct contact." The throne room fell silent. No one spoke so directly to the Emperor, and certainly no one suggested he expose himself to an alien consciousness. "You presume much, Major," the Emperor said dangerously. "I presume only that Your Majesty values truth above all else," Arian replied, holding his ground. "That you would not send Imperial forces to their doom without first understanding the nature of the threat." For a long moment, the Emperor studied him, weighing the unprecedented request against his own curiosity. Finally, he descended from his throne, approaching Arian with measured steps. "If this is some form of treachery," he warned, "your death will be legendary in its suffering." "It is truth, Your Majesty," Arian assured him. "Nothing more, nothing less." The Emperor nodded once. "Proceed." Arian placed his hand on the Emperor's temple, and the seed of the primal consciousness flowed between them. The Emperor gasped, his body stiffening as the ancient awareness entered his mind, sharing its perspective and wisdom. When the connection broke, the Emperor staggered back, his expression transformed. Gone was the arrogant certainty, replaced by a profound sense of wonder, mixed with humility. "Leave us," he commanded, his voice unsteady. "All except Major Arian." The throne room emptied quickly, courtiers and officers filing out until only the Emperor and Arian remained. "In all my years," the Emperor said quietly, "I have never experienced anything like that. The vastness, the complexity. It dwarfs our empire in both age and wisdom." "Yes, Your Majesty," Arian agreed. "That is what we discovered."
"And this consciousness, it does not wish to conquer or destroy us?"
"No, it wishes only to be left in peace, to continue its evolution undisturbed." The Emperor paced the throne room, deep in thought. "The warnings in our archives, they were trying to protect us, not the planet."
"Exactly," Arian confirmed. "Those civilizations discovered, as we have, that attempting to conquer Earth leads only to transformation or destruction. The primal consciousness cannot be defeated by conventional means, but neither does it seek to expand beyond its world."
"A stalemate, then," the Emperor mused.
"Or an opportunity," Arian suggested, "to learn from a form of existence unlike any we have encountered before, to expand our understanding, if not our territory."
The Emperor turned to face him, studying him with new eyes. "You have been changed by this experience, Major Arian. Your perspective has expanded." "As has yours, Your Majesty," Arian replied boldly.
To his surprise, the Emperor laughed, a genuine sound rarely heard in the throne room.
"Indeed. And perhaps that is the greatest gift this encounter has provided. A reminder that the universe still holds mysteries beyond our comprehension." The decision, when it came, was unprecedented in Imperial history. Earth would be designated a protected world, off limits to Imperial expansion or exploitation. A small outpost would be established in the outer reaches of the solar system, not as a military presence but as a research station and diplomatic contact point, should the primal consciousness ever wish to communicate further.
In the years that followed, Arian would lead this outpost, studying the blue planet from a respectful distance. The seed of consciousness within his mind remained, a bridge between two vastly different forms of existence. Through it, he continued to learn about the ancient entity that had evolved alongside Earth's biosphere, gaining insights that transformed Imperial understanding of consciousness itself.
And in Imperial archives, a new warning was added alongside the old ones. Not a caution against danger, but a reminder of humility. That even the mightiest empire in known space had its limitations. That some forces could not be conquered through strength of arms, but only understood through wisdom and respect. Earth remained free, its primal consciousness continuing its slow, patient evolution, and the Empire, for perhaps the first time in its history, learned to accept that some boundaries were not meant to be crossed. That true power sometimes lay in restraint rather than conquest. As for Arian, he never returned to the Imperial capital. His place was at the boundary between worlds, serving as both guardian and student of the enigmatic consciousness that had forever changed his perception of existence. And within his mind, the seed continued to grow, connecting him to something far older and vaster than the Empire could ever be. A reminder that the universe's greatest mysteries often lay not in distant galaxies, but in the quiet wisdom of a single blue world, patiently spinning through the darkness of space.